My name is Destiny,
My name is Aide.
My name is Raisa Mandera.
and today we'll be reading to y'all the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. In the days of a good King Alfred, there lived a little boy named Jack, with his widow mother in a very small cottage, in which there was no furniture at all, except one wooden stool and a rickety table. So Jack and his mother had to sleep on the floor. They were so very, very poor, and this was exceedingly uncomfortable.
Jack's father had been a farmer, but he was dead. As Jack was not big enough to dig and plow and attend to the farm, and there was no one else to do it. Soon all the money that had been left was spent.
So then Jack's mother was very miserable, and she told him that he must take the cow, all they now had left, and sell her. Jack was very sad, but he was a good little boy and wanted to help his mother. So he set off. He had not gone very far when he met a man, to whom he told his tale. The man spoke very kindly to Jack, and said he would willingly buy the cow, but that, as he had the money with him, he must give beans instead.
So Jack So Jack took off his hat, and the man filled it with beans, saying that they would grow to be wonderful plants, and would make his fortune.
Jack ran home to his mother in high glee, but she, when she saw just common-looking beans instead of pieces of gold, was very angry indeed, and threw them out of the window.
Jack was very unhappy, and cried himself to sleep that evening. But when he awoke the next morning, what was his surprise to see, on looking out of the window, a wonderful beanstalk, strong and tall, so tall indeed that the top was somewhere right up in the clouds and not to be seen.
It must have a top, thought Jack, and I mean to find it. So he began climbing up the beanstalk, and he climbed, and at last reached the top, which brought him on to a mountain where he saw a beautiful fairy who showed him a big castle at some little distance, and told him that that castle lived a dreadful giant who was very fond of roast boy for dinner, but that Jack must behave, and then he would get a great deal of money, for the giant was exceedingly rich.
Jack thanked the kind fairy and went onto the castle. There was a very big door, and he had to stand on tiptoe to knock, and the knocker was very heavy. But he managed it at last, and then he saw a face looking out of a window. Jack at first thought it must be the giant, but it was only the giant's wife, a kind woman, who, when she saw how hungry he was, for he had no breakfast and had come a long journey, took him in and gave him some dinner.
Jack was enjoying it very much, when the giantess, looking dreadfully frightened, said,
"Oh, oh, here comes my husband. What shall I do? If he sees you, he will have you roasted."
Jack was rather nervous at this, so he asked the woman to hide him. She put him in the copper. Then there was a terrible knocking and stamping, and in came the giant.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he live or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread.
Sang the giant, and his voice sounded like the wind among the trees on a very stormy day, or like lions in a menagerie at feeding time. And he walked all around, sniffing and snuffing, and peeping and prying into all corners and places where he thought anyone might be hidden. Then at last he thought he must have made a mistake, and that it was his dinner he had smelt, and he sat down to the table, and he ate a great deal, and drank a great deal. And Jack lifted up the cover of the copper just a little way and watched him.
When the giant had eaten till he could not eat no more, He took some bags full of gold out of his pocket and placed them by his side, and then he was so tired that he lay back in his chair and went to sleep.
Now is my time. Though Jack thought Jack, so he climbed out of the copper and crept up to the giant. He seized the bags of gold and ran to the window, jumped out, climbed down the beanstalk, and so reached home.
Jack's mother was delighted to see him again, and very much astonished and pleased was she when she saw the gold. Now, while the giantess was feeding Jack, she had told him of a wonderful hen which her husband owned, which he said laid golden eggs. Jack thought.
If we had that hen, we should never be poor any more.
So the next day he climbed up in the beanstalk again and went to the castle. This time no one was home. So he took the hen and got back safely, although she cackled so loudly that the giant must hear, wherever he might be. And once more Jack went to the castle, this time to fetch a lovely golden harp, which sang beautiful songs when it was told. He got into the castle all right and took the harp while the giant was having his afternoon sleep. But the harp began to call out in a very loud voice.
Master, master, wake, wake.
And the giant did wake. He rushed after Jack with his dreadful club in his hand. Jack came to the beanstalk and climbed down as quickly as he could.
As he got to the bottom, he felt the stalk swaying terribly, and looking up, he saw that big, fierce giant coming down after him. Jack's mother came running out of the cottage, and she fetched a hatchet, which she gave to Jack, and he hacked away at the beanstalk and at last cut it right through. Then it came tumbling down and the giant too, and he fell on his head and was killed dead as a stone.
So Jack and his mother now had enough and lots to spare and lived happily ever after for the rest of their days.